yes, Stu and I have been having this fantasy conversation about what if we began to undertake for every Nova Scotian to have grade 12. And Stu, unfortunately, doesn't have the cash for me today, but we're still working on it. And it is an enormous number. But I think that underlying that idea is something else that Stu talked about, that this matters. And what I really like about the work that Scott is doing is that there's always been a moral imperative for literacy. Well, now there is an economic, moral, and statistical imperative for literacy. And we need to keep pushing on those things, because I think so many people think that math and language literacy in particular is a nice thing to have versus an imperative to actually participate in the world. The Nova Scotia Community College obviously is involved in literacy, particularly at level 3, level 4, and we're also involved in many ways with the workplace literacy efforts as well, in combination with Stu. But I think there's a couple of interesting things that the college is working on that George, who's over there in the suit and tie in particular, has been advancing for the college, which is beginning to link literacy to particular occupations. In what ways does healthcare, if you're going to choose to work in healthcare, what literacy is required? So when people come to the college and have this idea of literacy and wanting something in particular, it becomes tied to a longer term goal. And I think that's an incredible piece of important work. And when we look at the stats, 80% of people who have literacy issues in Nova Scotia are working. And then you read things worldwide. You know, I'm one of those knowledge junkies, and you read these tiny little notes in the Globe and Mail. You have countries like Korea, who's just put into legislation human-robot interaction. And you begin to think, what happens to people at certain places in the economy if in fact there's going to be profound changes, as Scott has said. And I agree with Stu. We cannot leave the lower levels behind. I think, yes, the return on investment, the shorter period of time, the quick return on investment, it's a smart place to be working economically. But if you think about quality of life and social good, if we leave the lower levels behind, we've left them behind socially as well as economically. And I think that, you know, we do some really specific programs at the college, the African Nova Scotian Transition Program, working with people from the African Nova Scotian community who don't have high school. And you sit and talk to one of those students about where they've been and where they want to go. There is nothing more profound than the moment when they have the skill to see their future. And so I agree with Scott. I think government does have to pay. But it's actually not government, this kind of amorphous thing. It's actually us. My tax dollars. And this is one of the things that I talk a lot about in literacy, that we kind of say the government should pay as if the government has its own money. It only has what we are willing to give it and what we're willing to tell them they should spend it on. And so I think there's a powerful piece of work that I would encourage Scott to continue doing, to try and tell every Canadian that this is the work of our country. And then suddenly, Stu's fantasy and my fantasy of taking every Nova Scotian who doesn't have grade 12 to grade 12 becomes, well, yes, of course we would do that. Not some dream that both of us are going to be sitting in our rocking chairs before it ever happens. So those are a couple of things that I would add, and I'll add other things later.
How about your comments, Cyril?
Sure. If I can reach up to a mic. I agree with a lot of what Stu was saying and what Joan was saying. Where I come from, I may be one of the, I think I'm one of the rare instances in a business that we believe that education plus hard work equals profit. And we've shown that because what we've done is that we've taken an industry and started it in Lockport, and where there's no previous experience with that whatsoever. Most of the people that work in our plant are from the Lockport area. The previous jobs they would have been cutting fish on the production line, or working out fishing, or maybe working at the corner store. And we took them in, and most of the jobs do require manual dexterity, but there's also a fair amount of literacy components. We did some skill development programs with workplace education, and very early on we discovered that numeracy skills, one of the things you mentioned, you know, dealing with fractions or dealing with scientific notation were things that we have to deal with on a daily basis in our industry, and most people that were working for us never used them since high school. In fact, one of them turned around one day and looked at us and said, oh, so that's why I took scientific notation in high school. And it was why, because we're getting into some of the higher, high technology jobs that the world is competing with us against, you know, against us or with us, and they do require those skills. They do require you to understand, you know, how to have good numeracy skills, how to write reports, how to read work instructions, how to prepare corrective actions, how to operate your job. And in order for us to compete with those companies, we had to have people that didn't have those skills learn those skills, and we did that through education. A lot of it on-the-job training, a lot of it through workplace education. We did 2 ONAs, organized needs assessments, one back in, I think it was 96 or 97, and then we did another one in 2006. When we first started doing our development, we had about 8 people, and by the time we did another ONA in 2006, we had 50 people, and just in January, we had 69 people. So we keep growing, and because we keep bringing in new people, we have to constantly keep training people. Now, of course, we're getting hit with the recession and that, but this also, you know, we'll address that in a later question maybe about what to do in a recession with these sort of things. But just to sort of talk about some of the things that we identified, basic computer skills. We had probably 1/3 of our workers never turned on a computer before. Just no idea. And yet some of them should use a computer for what they were doing. So that was one of the things that we had to train people on. One of the things that I'm looking at here and seeing if A1 to E1, which one was government or which one was say business, I think the lower, the A1 skills, I think that's certainly a government initiative in my mind. When you get higher up the chain, it looks to me like it could be a government business mixture. And then as you get to a higher level, then that should be a business, because that's more directly related to business. Getting businesses to understand that it is important, I can see from ourselves, it's been a big impact on us. We would not survive as a company if the people did not take education and training seriously and learn how to do their job. And that's companies that miss that point will fall behind.